kids cannot access safe and stable relationships if they don't know how to attach because they've had so much trauma through detachment. And so connection really is everything. Welcome to the Riverside Project podcast. We are mobilizing Houston to empower families and transform generations. We hope these conversations will give you a greater understanding of the issues facing our community and inspire you to find your place along the river.
Hey everybody, welcome back to the Riverside Project podcast. My name is Chandler James, Chief of Staff here at the Riverside. On today's podcast, we have actually our Executive Director and Founder, Amber Knowles. And so we're excited to have a conversation with her today where we can talk a little bit about how is the Riverside Project founded. We can talk about kind of her vision for that and all the things. So we thought it would be fun to actually interview, kind of flip it around a little bit and interview Amber and have a great conversation. And so Amber, thanks for being on the podcast. How does it feel to be on the flip side?
It feels weird being on this side of the table.
Yeah, no, it's great.
Glad to do it.
Thanks for hanging out for a little bit and taking time to be on the other side of the table. But obviously a lot of our listeners probably know a little bit about you. But for those who maybe don't, tell us a little bit just about who you are, your family, things like that. Kind of give us like a short bio, kind of what you do here.
I am a wife to Drew. He is a pastor. He's an Anglican priest here at Oak Forest Anglican Church. I have 4 kids. They are 11. Addie is 11, 10. Judah's 10. Oliver is 8, and Josiah is 7. Yeah. He would say 7.5. He will be 8 in February. So You
also have not to cut you off. I say not to cut you off, then I'm going to cut you off. But you have a new member of the family.
We have a new member of the family, Molly. She's a golden doodle. We got her about a month ago.
Nice. We're in the potty training stage, right?
Yes. She's getting it. She's actually very smart. She's been really great and a great addition to our family. Yeah. I'm a nurse. Went to Baylor for college. I guess. I don't know. Went to nursing school at Baylor. I worked in pediatric oncology for about 7 years. Went back to school. Got a master's degree in nursing. Became a nurse practitioner in pediatrics, and then started working in community health and school-based healthcare. So I worked at a couple of different places around town. I also traveled around as a nurse around the country a little bit. Worked in LA, lived in Nashville for a bit. Just kind of bounced around for much of my 20s, which was a lot of fun. Then, of course, started a family. Our personal experience in foster care, 2 of our boys came to us through foster care. And that just opened our eyes to just what the system is and what the struggles are and what the challenges are and the variety of needs that kids have and their families have. And that it really just got me thinking, really systemically, how can I use my background in medicine to affect change in a system that's not the human body, but is a system nonetheless? Yeah. And so I just started asking people, lots of questions about what is wrong with the system, what is great about the system, what's working, what's not. And that kind of led us to what is now the Riverside Project. Yeah, it's been an interesting journey.
Yeah, and I want to jump in a little bit of like the Riverside Project, like how that came to be, like all of those things. But even as I'm hearing you talk, and we've known each other for many years now, but I don't think I know like why you and your husband Drew like even jumped into like being a foster parent. Yeah. And so if you're willing, like I'd even love to hear even personally, like just that story. How did you even get to the point where you're like, I think we're going to be foster parents?
Yeah.
Because that really like hearing you talk a little bit about it is kind of like the trajectory of like kind of opening your eyes to what the system really is and what it would look like to even start something like this.
Yeah, it's weird to think all the way back to that and see everything that's happened because of that decision. What a big decision that was. And we had no idea. Drew and I both, when we were dating, had a conversation and both felt like the Lord was calling us to adopt for various reasons. I don't know that I ever had we always say, like, there wasn't like a burning bush moment of like, we're supposed to foster, you're supposed to adopt. It wasn't like that. It was just this, it made sense. We cared about our neighbors. We cared about our city. we knew that as we tried to grow our family and that would be a part of the conversation. And so from the very beginning, it was just kind of like a normal thing. That's just what we were going to do. We actually had an adoption fund as part of our wedding registry. So instead of getting us gifts, they could give to an adoption fund. We didn't know how we would adopt. We didn't even really know anything about it. And so as we started really thinking about it, we looked at just kind of the different ways of being able to adopt. We looked at foster care, private adoption, international adoption, and it just made sense to do foster care here locally. And so that money was really helpful for helping us get our home ready and just kind of some of those minor costs that come with that. And so it really was just something that the Lord laid on our hearts separately. And then as we started thinking it through, it was just kind of a very normal thing for us. Yeah. We always said, like, we'll try to get pregnant. We'll see if we can have kids biologically. If that's a struggle, then we'll go that route quickly. And if not, we'll wait. And Addie was she was 6 months old when we started the process. So we started really quickly because we knew that it was something we wanted to pursue and we didn't know how long it was going to take. So started the process at 6 months. We're licensed when she was 13 months. And Judah came to us when she was 14 months.
Wow.
So they're pretty close together.
What was the trajectory? So it was Addie, Judah, and then...
Yeah. So, we moved very quickly with building our family or growing our family. Judah came when Addie was 14 months old. They're 13 months apart. Judah's adoption from placement to adoption took 17 months. So that would have been November of 2016. He was adopted. The next month, I got pregnant with our third kiddo. And then when Oliver was 9 months old, we were closed as a foster home. I had a conversation with Drew about like, hey, let's close our home. We have too many little kids at home. Our life is crazy. And I remember him saying, when you say like we want to open our home again later, what's the timeline in your mind? And I was like, not anytime soon. We were just drowning in diapers and little kids. And like 3 weeks later, when our youngest at the time was 9 months old, we got a call that the brother of our adopted son was going into foster care and asked if we would reopen our home, kind of surprisingly and unexpectedly, which was a very big conversation. But we ended up obviously doing that. And so our two youngest are 6 months apart. They were 9 months and 3 months when he came to us. Yeah.
And at around like kind of that same time is when you kind of started getting the idea, I'm assuming, of like kind of starting the nonprofit. At the time it was called Fostering Family. And so talk us through a little bit for those who maybe don't know like kind of the quote unquote founder story of what is now the Riverside Project. Talk us kind of through that journey. Because it's crazy like hearing all that and then thinking like, and like you said 2016 and I'm like, and then I know that you started kind of like formulating this like 2017, 2018. So I'm like,
it makes no sense.
That sounds like a crazy time.
It was a crazy time. Every time I think about it, every time I talk about it, I'm like, this doesn't make any sense. And which reminds me that it was very much the Lord's hand in making everything happen because it could not have been me. I truly had a 4-year-old, barely 4, barely 3, 9 months and 3-month-old. And at around the time when all of this got started. And it was truly like taking a step and taking another step and letting the Lord just kind of multiply things. And it's truly by His grace that it's become what it has become. I was very focused on how do we engage our church in this space. We have fostered, we have adopted, and we knew that there were other people in our church who wanted to do the same thing, but we were seeing a lot of gaps in support. And just lots of gaps for biological families. And so a big part of it was like, how do we engage our church into this space? So I went to a conference in Austin that was hosted by Fostering Hope Austin back in 2017. I was pregnant with Oliver at the time. That would have been February of 2017. Went to a conference with another adoptive mom and saw this organization that was kind of this hub in the wheel. They were like this neutral nonprofit. They weren't CPS. They weren't a particular church. But they were this nonprofit that was pulling everybody together. They were having all these conversations. They were doing like trauma training. They were working with churches. They had a lot of wisdom around pulling everyone toward one another. And I was like, this is it. I have never seen anything like this, but this really could work. Not just engaging our church and mobilizing our church to have a place, but actually engaging the church in our city. Mm-hmm. And so I came home, I'm pretty sure I freaked Drew out because I was like, oh my gosh, this is all the things that I learned. And like, there's this organization. And he was just like, oh my gosh, what is happening?
He's like, I'm just here changing diapers.
I know. He's like, actually, let me tell you all the things that happened while you were gone. So that I kept in touch with that founder and executive director in Austin and just kept asking questions, kept having phone calls and saying like, does this exist in Houston? And she was like, I mean, my hope was that she would say, yeah, there's this organization that you can volunteer your time with that you just never knew about. But it just didn't exist. She said, there's a lot of good work happening in Houston, but a lot of it is a little bit territorial or people just aren't working together for whatever reason. And so it really needs to happen. It just doesn't yet. And so, it just became one conversation after another. And I started talking to different church leaders. I think I talked to Tony Steer early because I remember still being very pregnant when I went into her office. And
for people who don't know
Tony's at Houston's First. She was one of the first people that Julie actually connected me to over at Fostering Hope Austin. And it just set this thing in motion. And I think for the next year to 2 years, really, probably a year and a half, all I did was meet with people. I would meet with someone and they say, you need to talk to this person. You need to talk to this person. So I just go sit and ask them questions and say, what are the things that are really working? And if there was something you could change in this space, what would it be? And started just kind of understanding, probably more from like a medical perspective. I'm like doing this broad assessment of the patient, right? Yeah. What's happening? What are they saying hurts? I'm looking at data, or the lab report, right? What's actually happening here? And then what are the gaps? Where does someone need to step in? And where can there be places where people can start working together? And so, that's just kind of the trajectory of how it all happened. And I think 2018 was when I had no idea how to run a nonprofit. I didn't go to school for business, obviously.
You're Googling things.
I Googled
how do I start it? Then,
exactly.
So you were just straight Googling things.
Exactly. How do you start a business? How do you start a nonprofit? And I was like, okay, I'll file this with the Secretary of State.
What's a fiscal year?
Yeah. Thankfully, my husband, being a pastor of a church plant, we followed kind of the lead of like what he had done with helping the church get started. And it was just one thing after another. And here we are.
No, I think that's great. Talk to me. I want to talk a little bit about the Babysitting Collaborative because that was the, like, incorrect me if I'm wrong, like the very first like kind of initiative that at the time the organization was called Fostering Family when it first launched. And that was the first initiative that was like, you kind of went through that assessment like phase where you're kind of like, here's the gaps that we see. Here's the people that need to be like kind of pulled together.
Yeah.
And I guess on that same line, like one of our like now team values that we have here is this like idea of bring what you have. And hearing you share, and I've had the opportunity to hear this story like many times, but it is really cool. Like every single time you share it, I'm just like, kind of like what you said earlier, it's like nothing really like adds up to where it's like, and then this happened, and then this happened, and now I should start a nonprofit because I see all of these gaps, right? It's actually like this faith-driven open-handedness of like asking the questions. And so I'm curious, like talk through like, to summarize what I'm saying here, because I'm saying a lot of words.
What is the question?
The question is to say, how does like this idea of bringing what you have into a space that you don't know a ton about at this point, but you're still learning and also starting an initiative at the same time with the Babysitting Collaborative?
I mean, the idea of bringing what you have, it was the reminder, just going back to what we were just talking about, it was, I have all of these thoughts that are kind of jumbled together, right? There's all of these needs, there's all these different people, all these different challenges. I have 4 little kids at home who need me, and 2 of them who are healing from trauma in addition to all the other things. And it really was, I don't know, I have this desire to see this change. I have this opportunity to do this, but I don't know what to do with it. And I don't have the first clue about doing any of it. What do I do? And the Lord just continually reminded me of the feeding of the 5,000. Just bring the basket. That's all. I'm not asking you to change the trajectory of Houston at this moment. I'm not asking you to really do anything except bring the basket of fish and loaves that you have. And so it really was like every day, here's what I have to give. And it's not a ton of time. It's not a ton of energy. It's zero money, I mean, it was just, this is all I have.
Yeah.
If you can do something with this, great. But it's going to have to be you doing it, right? The Lord has to be the one to multiply what I don't have. And it was kind of through that posture, I think, and just the faithfulness to bring whatever it was that I had that day. That's kind of what has really set the tone even for our staff. Now, it's still what we talk about as a team that, hey, bring what you have. You don't have enough, but bring it anyway. That's just what we tell each other all the time. Because there's too much need in the city to feel like we can fix all of it. But going back to the Babysitting Collaborative, that was our first program. And really it was because that was something that Fostering Hope Austin had already started doing something like that was easy to kind of replicate. And they were so gracious to help us to do it here. But it was also in response to a need where we would go to all these different agencies and we would ask them, how many babysitters do foster families have? Because we felt that as a foster home and as a family, you can't just have your mom and dad come over and babysit for you when you're a foster family. You can't just have your neighbors stop by and watch your kids while you have to go to school pickup or something. You actually have to have them background checked, fingerprinted, CPR certified. And so we found that a lot of families were not getting the help that they needed. They were just really tired. They were not sticking with it. And a lot of them were shutting their homes because they were just so tired and overwhelmed. And so we started talking to different agencies and saying, hey, how many babysitters on average do your families have? And we kept hearing 0, 1.
Yeah, it's crazy.
We don't, not many.
Yeah.
And we're like, that's a problem. And for our family, we had a fairly small church plant at the time, but it made sense to me to just bring a bunch of people over to our house, bring a CPR instructor in, bring all the forms to them. And we had like 25 babysitters for just our family. And of course, our agency was like,
I'm not trying to do that paperwork.
Exactly. They were like, we have this one family who sends us all this paperwork. And what I had to tell them was, we're thinking about this more globally. We know we're not going to be the only family in our church that fosters. And if we can get them certified now, we can then just hand them. They can step in because they know the support is already there. That's the shift, right? But even the system itself was not thinking that way. And so that was kind of the shift towards thinking a little bit differently of like, what can we do? What do we have available to us? And what experience do we have that can offer a different solution?
Yeah. No, I think that's really good. And the idea with the Babysitting Collaborative, right? Even like today, like it's shifted over the years, obviously. I think actually, I don't know if you know this, but we just trained our 1,000th babysitter.
Wow, I didn't know that.
I don't know if you saw that. So there you go. Which is super cool since 2018. Yeah. But I think that's like really a big part of that is obviously collaboration, which I want to talk about in a minute. And how the organization has grown really into that. But one thing I've heard you say for years now is this idea of like, we've got this crisis in our city, and there's many of them as it pertains to child welfare, but specifically we hear agencies, we hear nonprofits and people in our city say, well, there's too many kids that are in the system and there's not enough foster parents. And this idea of like, could we create a collaborative around babysitting where foster parents are really well supported? And I've heard you talk often about, hey, the goal should not like simply be recruitment, but it's actually like support and sustainability for his family. Can you kind of talk about that idea? Because that's a big heart, I think, of that initiative. So,
yeah, and I think the underlying reality for that, or that underneath all of that, is that healthy families multiply. The reality that healthy families will multiply, and recruitment always follows support, not the other way around. So you can recruit all you want, but if none of those families are supported, it's pointless. It's a waste of money. It's a waste of resources and time. But if you can really focus on supporting families really, really well, making sure when they have a need, there's a solution and there's somebody in their midst helping them with that need. If they need childcare, we figure out a way to get them the support that they need through childcare. If they need a break, if they need resources, if they need tools, if they just need somebody to drop off coffee on their doorstep, to make them feel seen and to help them know that they're not in this alone, that will keep them going. And in a way that like you can run a huge recruitment campaign. But again, if the support is not there, you're just spinning your wheels. And I think it's something that as a system, we don't always think about. We think about like, how do we put a bunch of marketing dollars towards recruiting new families? And on the flip side of that, we know the struggles of helping kids heal from trauma. It is not an easy thing. It's a very, very hard, lifelong journey. And if we're just kind of recruiting through marketing campaigns, we're not really equipping people to do the work for the long haul.
Yeah.
And so we've put a lot of focus on helping agencies support their families, helping our community step in and support families so that those families will multiply and more people will willingly step in.
Yeah, that's good. Talk me through, like, obviously our name as an organization is no longer Fostering Family, but it's actually the Riverside Project. So talk me through kind of that shift. And I have the privilege of kind of knowing some of that story, but like even hearing you talk about like, hey, there is a need of more foster parents. The answer to that need is not just recruitment, right? But we actually need to like go upstream and say, why are we needing to recruit so much in the first place?
Exactly.
Right.
Yeah.
So talk to me about how just this like paradigm shift and this idea of the river, and some people who are listening may know that like kind of parable that we use, some may not, but talk to me about this idea of the river, how that came to just be like, this is what we're doing, this is what we're focused on, is really system change work and paradigm shifting initiatives, if that makes sense.
Yeah, we always, from the beginning, just with the way that we sat, I kind of sat and learned from a lot of different people, and we kind of had this 30,000 foot view of the system as a whole, right? It was, even through the Babysitting Collaborative, I'm going to this agency and trying to understand what's your process for certifying babysitters, and I go to another agency and theirs is different, right? And trying to understand, why do you have these qualifications or requirements, and then you have these over here, and they're like, well, nobody's actually talking to each other and getting on the same page, right? So we kind of became this organization that had this 30,000 foot view of all these different agencies and nonprofits. And so in my mind, it was just like, how do we get the right ones talking to each other? How do we get everyone in the right places? And then I came across Jason Johnson, who's been a good friend for a long time, that works for the Christian Alliance for Orphans, wrote a book called Everyone Can Do Something. Mm-hmm. And I remember reading it, and in it, there was this parable that I think has been attributed to Desmond Tutu or a number of different people about this idea of the river, where if you and two of your friends were walking down the side of a river and you see kids and families in the water, one of you would jump in and start pulling them out to the side and trying to stabilize them on dry ground. Hopefully, one of your friends knows that there's a waterfall downstream and runs downstream to catch the ones that are getting past you before they go over that waterfall. And hopefully, one of your friends is thinking, why are these kids and families in the river in the first place? We have to go upstream and put a stop to that. And this kind of blew my mind. It really was like, this is so helpful to understand that foster care as a system is not one isolated problem. It's actually really intricately connected to so many social issues in our city. It's not just child welfare, foster care, brokenness. It's kind of what people think. But upstream, it's connected to poverty and homelessness and addiction and crisis pregnancy and all these issues that families are dealing with, causing them to be unstable, and they're falling into the water. Sometimes these families have been generationally living in the water. And then when kids and families don't ever stabilize, they go on downstream, they age out of foster care, and the cycle continues. Yeah. And so really it's this, the picture is like, this is not just an upstream, downstream river. This is like a raging, lazy river that unless it gets disrupted somewhere, it just cycles back in on itself. And so this picture helped me to see we have to disrupt it, but not in just one place. Yeah. We need people all along the river, churches, businesses, nonprofits, passionate people who can say, I want to find my place along the river. And it's going to be like, this is specifically where it's going to be. And I need the tools that I need to get kids and families out of the water. And it kind of just gave this vision for what if everyone in our city found their place and started linking arms. And it's not just on CPS to do this work. It's not just on one nonprofit to do this work or one church, but we all have a place. And so it's really this communal effort that can truly change a city. But we just all have to do our part.
Yeah. Yeah. No, that's great. I remember the first time that like I heard you say that, even before we had the like fancy animated video version now that we get to send people. But when we sat at a coffee shop and you kind of like drew it out for me a little bit, and I was on staff at a church at that point, and I remember saying like, this is it. Mm-hmm. Like, this is what we've been trying to communicate to our people at our congregation, but didn't have the words or the framework for that. Along those lines, what would you say to somebody that would say, that sounds great, or that's nice in theory? It sounds a little theoretical. Mm-hmm. what does that look like in practice? And maybe you could even talk a little bit about some of the initiatives that we've that have kind of come into fruition from that idea, right? It is from the idea or the concept of the river that, yes, it can be practical and it can be relational. Does that make sense?
Yeah. What I left out in that conversation was how we actually became the Riverside Project, which was we started an initiative specifically to engage the church. I think we started in 2020, I believe, which is the best time to start a new initiative. We started working with some churches on the north side of Houston, specifically bringing them together. And our name for our church mobilization initiative was the Riverside Project.
Right.
It just made sense, but it was really focused specifically on the church. And as more and more people latched onto that vision, it was very clear pretty much right away that we've got to use this more broadly.
Yeah, because businesses are jumping in and saying, oh, wait,
I have a place
that's great.
along the river.
I have a place here, right? Nonprofits are saying, wait, but we're already longer. We have a place, right? So it's just,
and I think it was 2 years into being a nonprofit. It's who rebrands 2 years in?
That's so true.
I don't know. And so as a very small, I think we had
strategy.
Exactly. I think we had 3 people on staff at the time. And so when I come in to the office and I'm like, hey guys, I think we should rebrand the entire organization. It was a long conversation, and it took longer just to decide that we were going to overhaul everything. But it was worth it. But yeah, I think to answer your question, in theory, it does seem very theoretical. I think if you work in this space, it's much easier for people if they're working for a nonprofit or working at CPS or working for a church that's engaging in this space to be like, oh, that makes a lot of sense. Because we see how if you're connected to vulnerable people or you're serving them in some way, you can see that their issues aren't just, unilateral. They have lots of different things that are happening all at once. And you very quickly recognize that no single organization is going to solve all of this, that it has to be a communal effort and a whole community coming together and playing their part. But yeah, I think if you really think through all the different parts of the river and all the different opportunities to engage, you can work upstream. You can, with biological families and with poverty, homelessness, all those things. You can work in child welfare. You can work downstream of it and trafficking. All these people are doing things all across our city. You can also be in the water with families, or you could be way in the back sending resources. There's so many different places that you can engage. And I think through doing trauma training and really saturating our community with trauma-informed principles and giving tools so that people can continue to do the work. All of that is important, but it can't just be one specific, this is all we do and this is all we're going to do. A lot of organizations do that, but for us, it is how do we get people in their right places, and then how do we get them tools and resources to do the work? Yeah,
and I think the beauty of it is, this is I'm obviously biased now, I'm on our staff, but before I came on staff, to me, the beauty of it has always been, it's not Riverside Project doing the work, right? A lot of it is we're kind of the connectors more than we are the implementers in the city. And I've heard you say to many people across our city, right? We're not the organization that you give the money and then we deliver the backpacks, right? It's more so we're kind of sitting at that 30,000 foot view and saying, how do these pieces kind of fit together? And so to that end, we hear words like collaborative or collaboration or working together or networks, things like that. And a lot of the initiatives that we run here at the organization are with the heart of, in the spirit of collaboration in mind. I will say, personally, as somebody who gets to sit in some of these different meetings across our city, I hear the word collaboration a lot these days.
Yeah.
Talk to me about, from your perspective, what does it mean to be a collaborative organization? I guess even more so than that is to be a collaborator in our city.
Yeah, I think it's not just collaboration, but coordination as well. So you can collaborate all day long, but unless you're creating a coordinated effort toward solving an actual problem, it's collaboration, but it kind of ends there. And so I do think that there has to be shared vision, there has to be shared language, there has to be a direction and a goal that we're moving towards. But yeah, I do think collaboration in theory has become kind of a buzzword, which I'm not sad about. We should be doing more of it, whether we do it well or not. We have to keep working on. But yeah, I think a lot of it is being able to come to a group of people to solve a particular problem and say, this is what I can bring to the table, not how do I get everybody on board with what I'm doing, right? I think we've seen some of that on both sides, right? You always know when you go into a collaborative meeting and someone's there to sell something and you're like, this is what is happening right now. This is not
like put your flyer away.
This is not collaboration. Don't bring your flyers here. Like we're trying to solve a specific problem and we're trying to say a big part of that is just listening. And I think in the nonprofit space, because we all care so deeply about our mission, as an individual organization, we bring that to the table and we're really going into it thinking, how do I get all these other people to serve my mission? And instead of broadening that to say, we're all after the same thing, how do we coordinate our efforts together to get to that collective vision? That's a totally different conversation and it's a totally different posture. But I do think that it is a lot more effective long-term and even efficient, right? If we're pooling our resources and we're doing everything that we can do as well as we can with others, we make this work so much more efficient. Sometimes that means we need to stop doing certain things. Sometimes that means we need to push further towards something that we are doing, or we need to do it in a different way. But I'm actually going to talk to people who can tell me, how do I do this better? What are you seeing that I'm not seeing? And it makes us better. It makes us all better if we come in with that type of a posture where we want to listen to other people and we want to find that collective vision and move forward, rather than I'm really just here to get whatever you have to make me better.
Correlate that to, I've heard you talk a lot about this and done some workshops on it and things like that. But this idea of like our city being an ecosystem, that is a delicate ecosystem. It's something that needs to be cultivated. How does that like kind of fit into this idea of collaboration and what that really looks like?
Yeah, I've done some like conference workshops and things like that on just this idea of like looking at collaboration as tending a garden. So if you were to go into any sort of like a farm or a plot of land and you were going to cultivate that, or you're going to create some beautiful garden from it, what would you start doing? Like you would spend some time learning about like what's the climate here? What is the soil like? What things can grow here or have grown here? What's already growing? What's not? What needs to be thrown out? There's all these things that you would start learning about. And then you would really start tending the garden slowly. Like you would focus so much on the soil and the relationship building and the trust building before you do anything. And so much of that it just takes a lot of time. And you can't do it by yourself, right? And it takes a lot of, I think, discernment, and a lot of wisdom to understand what can bear fruit. And we always say like, you can work your butt off. You can work a whole lot tending and, toiling. And then eventually you just have to pray for the rain, right? Because the garden's not going to grow unless the Lord deems it so. And so there's all these different elements that you have to build towards and then pray for the fruit, Yeah.
No, I think that's really good. What are like kind of some of the core ingredients that you've seen like needed for a child welfare system specifically, and an ecosystem like that, to really we talk about this a lot, right? Make Houston a place where kids and families thrive. What are some of the kind of the key ingredients there?
Yeah, when we were using this analogy early on, our team has watched the biggest little farm a couple of times, and used this analogy of kind of building the sustainable farm. And what does that mean for child welfare? Like, what are the connections we could make to the system that we're actually in? We're obviously not going to build an actual farm, but it feels like it sometimes. It feels like we're cultivating.
I'd probably mess that up.
Yeah, so would I. But what elements can we take from that into the work that we're actually doing? And we kept asking the question of like, what is the soil? So much effort has to go into the soil because you can plant a whole lot of things, but if the soil is not conducive to growth, it's all for nothing. And so we have to get the soil right. And so that was a question that kind of stuck with me for a while. Like, what is the soil here? And in its relationships, it's kids and families have to have relationships to thrive. It has to be a part of it. Connection and attachment has to be a part of it. Otherwise, you can plant all kinds of different things and nothing will ever thrive. And so the question became, how do we as an organization foster that? How do we help build relationships? How do we help kids access healthy and stable relationships? How do we help families access safe and stable relationships where they can thrive in communities? And that is that's not an easy thing to create in a society. But if you really look at
sorry to cut you off.
Yeah.
Why do you feel like that's not an easy thing?
Because relationships are messy and relationships are hard and they take time. And when we see people, I think Doug Meikle on another podcast episode said, people don't become homeless because they run out of, money. They run out of relationships.
Yeah.
That's the reality of every person that we see in our city who is on the street or struggling. Every parent who's struggling with losing their child. It's not because they don't have resources, yes, but it's really because they don't have relationships in their life that can hold them up. And that it's tragic. And the hard part of that is it's not the easiest thing to give someone. It's easy to give out a backpack. It's easy to give out school supplies. It's easy to give out diapers and say, we wish you the best of luck. It's so much harder to say, I'm willing to give of myself. And it's scary and it's messy. And people have been burned in those relationships, when there's mental illness and there's other things going on. It's very hard and it takes a long time. And so it's just not the easy, quick solution.
Yeah.
I wish that it was. But so that's, I think, where a lot of our trauma-informed TBRI, why we started there, because if any ecosystem is going to flourish, we have to have a saturated community that understands why attachment and connection is so important. Because kids cannot access safe and stable relationships if they don't know how to attach, because they've had so much trauma through detachment. And so connection really is everything. If we have caseworkers who understand when you move kids 8 times, 12 times, 25 times, their ability to attach is so hindered that it creates all the problems that we see downstream. So a lot of it is still looking through this river analogy and saying what's happening way upstream that's causing a lot of this, and it's broken relationships. So we have to restore relationship if anything else is going to thrive.
Yeah.
I don't know if that makes sense. But.
Totally makes sense. Yeah. We say often, and I think this came from, again, another podcast. We're just shamelessly plugging the podcast right now.
Exactly. That's the whole point of this
that our regional director, here for DFPS said one time, but this idea that programs don't change people, people change people. And we've kind of adopted that phrasing a lot lately, and even changing some of our language. And not that there's anything wrong with calling programs, right? But we don't call it the TBRI program. We don't call it the Response Network program, right? We even shifted that to be it's an initiative, right? Because it's the idea is that relationships is the currency in this space, right? And that's what we're pushing. And so this idea of programs don't change people, people change people. Thoughts on that? And do you have a story that sticks out in your head that you're man, this is where I just have seen people show up? It could be general or a specific story.
I mean, programs don't change people, people change people. I think we see that in our day-to-day lives, right? Programs, and that's not to say programs aren't not beneficial. They 100% are, and they're needed. We need programs, we need structure. It's not to say that those things aren't important. They are. But if they have to be a conduit to helping people access relationship, at least in this space. Programs in other types of spaces may be much more helpful, but it has to be programs that help kids to attach and find relationships. And we always give the kind of the story of kids who are on a track to age out of foster care. Everyone's trying to teach them life skills. From the time they're 13, 14, we're trying to teach them life skills. And then they age out of foster care and somehow they still don't have the skills, right, to move into adulthood. And we wonder why. And we just kind of keep tagging on problems to the end of it and trying to teach them a skill. But what we're missing is the skill is not taught in relationship with safe and stable attached adults who are not leaving. The skill doesn't ever really get...
It's not like rooted.
They're not rooted, right? Because that's just how our brains are wired.
Right.
It's much harder to learn a skill when we don't have the safe and stable relationship with someone who's teaching us. For someone who's just graduating high school and moving on and has not had that disrupted attachment, it's a lot easier. But for someone who has zero long-term stable relationships in their life, who are not paid to be there, it's much harder to do that. So I think that's just, it's an important part of it that we have to be focused on. In terms of a story, there's like so many different ones that, and we see it through the Response Network all the time. I think there are lots of different nonprofits, different churches who are showing up every day, not just with things, but with actual invitations to relationship, I'm trying to think of just one specific one.
I mean, I even think about, I don't know if you can maybe even speak to this, but the one that you all did here, like at Oak Forest, Anglican, like y'all's church, like interacted with that family down the road with like this washer and dryer.
Yeah, and I had no idea about that for a long time because I'm just not always in all of the Response Network meetings. Yeah. And when I found out, like the actual church that I'm going to, that my husband is the pastor, that, there was a small group of people there's a family down the road who didn't have a working washer and dryer. And I think it was a kinship situation. A relative had taken in placement of one of their younger relatives, and they didn't have a washer dryer for a number of months. And sweet Susan, who's just, just a lady in our church, a widower, and she's been going to pick up laundry, wash it, fold it, and take it back to this family's house. And again, it's a task that needs to be done for them.
Yeah.
But more than anything, that is hey, I see you and you have worth and I want to do this for you. Whether they ever form some like long-term friendship, that'd be great. But it's this idea of like, I see you and you're worth my time. What that speaks to somebody is actually healing more so than maybe some specific program. I can go to a laundromat. We could have just given her money to go to a laundromat or a gift card, and that would have been helpful. But there's something else that gets communicated when it's like, well, I'll come and pick up your laundry.
Yeah. And I love that story. And we get to see like hundreds of these stories every year, right? These stories of people who are saying, I know what I don't have. And Susan being like, I don't have a washer or a dryer to give you, but what I do have is a car and a laundry bag, and I will wash them for you and bring them back to you. Right. And so I think like on that note, kind of as we kind of wrap up the conversation a little bit, I'm curious to like, if somebody's listening to this and saying, great, like I know all of these needs, I see the crisis, I hear it, I get it. I don't know where to step in. I don't know what that looks like for our family, or I'm worried about the risks, or all of these reasons why we make decisions of, I'm not going to step in because of this. I don't have the resources. I don't have the money. I don't have the program. I don't have the time, whatever. What would you say, and how would you encourage a person that's saying, I want to do something, I just don't know how?
Usually it's, let's not start with what you don't have. Let's start with what you do have to give. And we can get creative with that, right? If it's, hey, I'm a college student, I have time, I have $0 in my bank account, right? I've got time and I've got willingness,
right?
Great. Let's talk about, what about a mentoring program for youth who are on track to age out of foster care? Because most college students, they have relational ability, they can go have dinner or go do a program or something like that.
Or we joke, for example, like I always joke, like I remember being in college and I'm like, you got some Venmo balance in there. You got that Cash App balance in there, right? Like, you can use some of that, right? Like, hey, I forgot this Venmo balance was even in there because somebody paid me back for food and I forgot it was there. I can use this $12 for X, Y, and Z, right?
Yeah. And it just depends on like, everyone's in a different stage of life, right? When someone has a bunch of little kids at home, some time is not something that they have. Energy may not be something that they have. And maybe finances is something that you can invest somehow, and we can help you find the best place to do that. It really just starts with, what do I have to give? And then let's get creative about different ways that you can use that asset, because the Lord gives us different things in different seasons. And I think when we're stewarding that thing towards building something beautiful or redeeming and restoring what's been broken, the Lord honors that, and He does some really incredible things with it.
Yeah, I think it's good. Well, you know this obviously, but I do really appreciate, like, it's helpful to hear even like pre-Riverside Project, pre-fostering family, pre the organization being what it is today. Thinking back to you, Drew, your family, just saying, hey, we're going to make that step. I don't have the answers. I'm going to Google close agency close to me, right? Like whatever it is that you do when you don't know where else to go next.
Yeah.
But you guys have always had this posture. And I think as a byproduct, you've helped build an organization that has this posture, one that just says, hey, we're going to step one step closer towards people who are in hard places, and we're going to do whatever it takes to be in relationship with them. And it's going to be messy, and we don't have all of the answers. We don't have all the resources. We don't have all the money. But we're going to make that step.
I think that the biggest thing with that has been not doing it by yourself. I think from the very beginning, even when it was just a thought, Megan, who used to be on our team, I took her to coffee, and she was moving back to Houston, and she was like, I'll help you. Yeah. I was like, okay, great. And we're sitting at a coffee shop and just kind of figuring out little by little what this is going to be. And the Lord, He's brought more people to the table. And we say the best part of it is that we don't have to do it by ourselves. And the same is true on our team as it is in the community. The coolest thing about doing this type of work is when you're doing it together, it's not all on one person's shoulders, and you don't have the weight of everything around us. We can actually carry it together, and it's our work.
Yeah. Yeah, oh, that's good. Cool. Well, thanks for being willing to share. So, as you know, obviously, since you're normally on the other side of the table, we always take kind of the last 5 minutes of the podcast. I said it makes me nervous to just kind of ask like kind of more like quick questions. So we have like real quick, kind of some last 5 questions for you as we kind of wrap up our time.
On your paper.
So number 1, it's not on my paper, so you can't cheat. If you could only, this is funny because I already know the answer to this. If you could only drink one coffee order for the rest of your life, what would it be?
Not only do you know the answer to this,
and where would it be from?
Anyone who has known me closely, or not even that closely, for the last probably 20 years of my life could answer this question. It used to be, this is going to be a longer drawn out answer.
It used to be 100%.
Yes, because this is important to me. It used to be an iced vanilla latte. I would get one from a coffee shop pretty much every day of my life. However, I've been on a health journey, and sugar is no longer my friend. So now, speaking to my real bougie coffee order now, I get a double espresso over ice with honey and cinnamon, and then I take it home and pour in my own low sugar oat milk.
I just want to clarify for everybody that's listening. You go to a coffee shop, you ask for espresso over ice, and you have told this barista, and I know this, like, is it okay? Can you just put this in a cup, and then I'm going to go make the rest of it back at the office or my house?
I'm not proud of this, okay? That's basically what it is.
I love it. Okay,
it's
moving on.
It's the journey I'm on.
Great. You get
if anybody on the podcast wants to buy me an espresso machine.
Okay.
I wouldn't have to do this every day.
That's true. Would still drive to the coffee shop.
That is exactly what Drew would say
great.
too.
You get an all expense paid weekend trip anywhere in Texas. Where are you going? That's a hard question because there's not a lot of places that I'd want to go to in Texas.
I mean, I love Texas, and yet I had the same reaction.
Yeah.
Probably the hill country. That's probably what everyone would say. There's a lot of places out in that part of the state.
What would you do there?
Like sit in a hammock. Probably nothing. Just
great. Do you
hang
own
out.
a hammock?
No.
Okay, cool. Great.
Could get one.
Okay, next question. If you could tell your early 2017, 2018 self, so the version of you that has a lot of kids, well, I mean, you still have a lot of kids, but at the ages
little kids.
A lot of littles.
They were very
and
little.
Thinking through nonprofit stuff. What would you tell yourself?
Probably breathe. Just breathe. It's going to be okay. I mean, I think anyone who has young kids, I just want to tell them, hey, you're doing a great job. You're doing great, because in the day-to-day of like all the diapers and all the tantrums and all the things, it's really like I have on my phone screensaver or whatever. What's it called on your phone? It's not a screensaver.
Yeah.
It's not the background of your phone.
It's not actually 2017. So
you don't have to say screensaver. Yeah. Whatever the background of your phone. I currently have a picture on there of probably around that time, 2017, when they're all in a fitted sheet and I was just dragging them around the house like a choo-choo train because it was like 4:30 and Drew was not home yet. Yeah. And I was just at my wit's end and it was just like, choo-choo, we're just going through the house in a fitted sheet. And I still have that on my phone right now just as a reminder of like, hey, on my screensaver of my phone. I sound like my mom right now. It would just be, hey, you're doing a great job and you can breathe and it's going to be okay.
Okay. Next question. What's something that you think is gross that everyone else seems to like? I also want to answer this question, but I'll let you go first.
I want to hear your answer too. I don't know if this fits. It's fresh on my mind because last night on the way to softball practice, Addie pulled her tooth out in the car, and I have a major aversion to teeth. Not that everyone likes pulling out teeth. That's why I said it doesn't fully fit. I thought I was going to throw up. It was really gross. And I think most people don't have the aversion that I do. I can suture a kid. I can do a lot of, I'm in the medical field. I can do a lot of gross things. But just the thought of my daughter pulling out her tooth in the back of the car made me almost vomit. So I don't know if that fits. The other one.
It doesn't, but what's the other one?
Okay. I really don't have a great answer to this. It used to be sparkling water, but I've become an adult. I now really like a peach Waterloo, but it used to be, I didn't understand why people would drink bubbly water.
Yeah,
I just couldn't. And I don't like it plain.
That's fair.
Still. But people were all about
the correct answer
water.
is matcha. But
that is a good one. That is a really good one. I steal that one.
Okay.
Just erase everything.
Last question is when you look at the child welfare landscape here in Houston specifically, like what, I guess, gives you hope? Like what makes you hopeful?
I think it would be something around just the community aspect of where we are now that wasn't there 2017, 2018. That we are more cohesive just as a system. I also think that we're doing a lot more listening to like biological families and kinship families. And we're seeing this not as how do we get all the kids out of the river? And now we're starting to think more of like, how do we get families out of the river? And how can we protect children? Yes, but stabilize families also. And I think that's been a big shift over the last 7-8 years. And maybe it was kind of always moving in that direction, but I definitely see the fruit of it now. We still have some ways to go on like discerning how to do that well, but I'm really hopeful about that conversation. It's just a more holistic picture of what families need and helping them get that.
Yeah, that's great. Well, thanks for being on the podcast. Yeah. We appreciate you. I know it's not your favorite thing, and I kind of pushed you into being interviewed a little bit, but we greatly, greatly, greatly appreciate your voice. And so thanks for taking some time.
Good to be here. To those listening, we hope these conversations have inspired you to find your place along the river. And we welcome you to join us in bringing hope and renewal to the city of Houston. If you'd like more information on how to get involved, please visit riversideproject.org and submit a contact form. We'll see you next time.